This one is pointing in a generally negative direction. If you go through the stages of, shall we say, conflict at present, we have the beginnings of what may be a trade war. Mnuchin and co are on their way to Beijing with Lighthizer together with Navarro and the rest. Will that produce an outcome on steel and aluminium? Don't know, but this administration has resolved that it's the only way to get the deal out of Beijing that they think is acceptable. The second wave of all this, however, I think is much more serious, and that's the undeclared new Cold War on technology, information technology in particular. The decision the last week or so by the US regulators on ZTE, or ZTE, now that I'm back in London. Then you've got the retaliatory speech from Xi Jinping saying, we will now go it alone in terms of becoming IT resilient and independent. New actions being threatened against Huawei by the administration, an investigation now underway. There is an undeclared Cold War underway now in the IT sector. So that brings us to, as it were, the third domain, which is the political and military domain. There's a lot of activity underway which is invisible to most of us in the South China Sea on a given day. But so far, the rules of, shall we say, avoiding incidents at sea and avoiding incidents in the air have held. But it's been trending in a negative direction without, shall I say, an underlying political ballast between these two leaders to hold it together. So we're in difficult, I think, geostrategic times.
Well, just to ask you, who do you think is in the driving seat here? Because we can link all these stories together, of course, and it won't have been lost on a lot of people that shortly before this apparent change in attitude from Kim Jong-un, he turned up in Beijing on a train, had a quick meeting with Chinese officials, then disappeared, and then shortly after that we saw a lot of diplomatic initiatives. So as Donald Trump claims victory and demands the Nobel Peace Prize, should we actually be looking at the Chinese as the source of shifting the attitude of the North Korean leadership? Because quite frankly, it's the Chinese who supply them with energy, it's the Chinese who supply them with food and all sorts of other things.
I think if you were to put together the four relevant states, the two Koreas, China and the United States, who has actually played, as it were, the most effective diplomatic game here? It's the North Koreans themselves. Given a very limited pack of cards they've had to play with, here they are in the space of 2 months being able to pull off a summit with the President of South Korea, a summit with the President of China in Beijing, and an impending summit with the President of the United States, with so far not having to have handed anything across the table at all. So given where North Korea has been for the last 20 or 30 years, that's not a bad play in the world of diplomacy. But you know where you're absolutely right is this, and I think it goes to the question of where this summit with Trump is held with Kim Jong-un. My advice to the Americans is, have it in Beijing. The venue is still up for grabs. Why? Because China, at the end of the day, has the remaining leverage to make any deal which comes out of that summit on nukes possible or deliverable through verification and, as you say, the critical energy linkage which keeps the North Korean economy going. You rule the Chinese out of this equation, which is what some in Washington attempted to do. I worry about what happens the day after.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.